Good evening, everyone. I'm going to call this Committee of Adjustment hearing to order. Just before we get started this evening, I'm just going to go through the committee's protocols for the hearing this evening. Tonight we have 7 applications for 3 different property locations that we'll be hearing. The following procedure will be followed for tonight's hearing. Just a couple housekeeping rules. If you have cell phones, would you please turn them off or place them on silent mode? And when asking questions, if you come up to the podium, please address questions through the chair and not directly to the person that the question is being asked of. With that, the first order of business for the committee will be to ask for any disclosures of conflicts of interest of committee members that are on the, with regards to the applications that are on the agenda this evening. Following that, a request will be made for any deferrals or withdrawals of applications that are on the agenda. The committee secretary-treasurer will read out each application noted on the agenda with a brief description and staff recommendation. Following that, the applicant or the agent for the applicant will be asked to come forward to the podium on the right, and at that time to introduce themselves, and will be allotted a short period of time to add any additional comments or information that they wish to add with regards to the application. Members of the committee will then have an opportunity to ask the applicant any questions that they might have, followed by members of the public that wish to speak to an application. Any members of the public who wish to speak to an application will be asked to come forward, state their name and address for the record, try to limit their comments to 10 minutes, and must present and ask all questions or comments pertinent to that application in that time frame. Persons making a presentation may not necessarily be allowed to return again to speak on that application. Following all comments, the applicant will be afforded some closing comments if desired. The committee will then present a decision in the form of a motion. The motion will be discussed and voted upon. If a vote is tied, the motion will be defeated and a new motion will be made. If a motion is defeated, new motions will continue to be made until we have a decision that is reached. Notices of decision will only be provided to those persons who leave their name and addresses in writing with the Secretary-Treasurer. There's a sign-in page at the back of the room for that purpose. In addition, for anyone that's watching at home that are attending the meeting, you may email Samantha Young, SAMANTHA.YEUNG @portcolborne.com, or immediately following the meeting can call 905-835-2600 extension 204 and leave a message requesting, leaving your name and address requesting notice to be sent to you. It should also be noted that in order to be kept advised of any possible local planning appeal tribunal hearings, persons must request and be sent a copy of the committee's decision on the application. So with that, I will ask if there's any conflicts of applications this evening from committee members. Not seeing any. Is there any requests or deferrals of applications this evening from any of the applicants? Not seeing any. I know, Sam, you had mentioned something earlier, and what we can do is maybe wait till we get to those applications and we can bring it up at that time, if that works for you. So with that, I will turn it over to Madam Secretary to read the first application, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Our first application for tonight is B09-22-PC. In the matter of the Planning Act RSO 1990, CP 13, Section 53(1), and in the matter of the lands legally known as Concession 2, Part Lot 5 and 6 in the City of Port Colborne, Regional Municipality of Niagara, located in the Agricultural Zone, municipally known as 1498 Wilhelm Road, and in the matter of an application by the owner Andy Veenstra for a severance under Section 53(1) of the Planning Act RSO 1990 CP 13, so as to permit the conveyance of Part 1 having a lot frontage of 14.2 meters along Wilhelm Road and a total lot area of 1 acre for an existing residential use. Part 2 will retain a lot frontage of 448 meters along Wilhelm Road with a total lot area of 69 hectares. For an existing agricultural use, a notice was circulated to the public on May 20th, and required departments were also circulated on May 13th, 2022. As of June 8th, the following comments have been received. The fire department has no objection to the proposed application. The drainage superintendent has no objection to the application, but notes a drainage apportionment agreement will be required if severance is approved. The MPCA staff has no objection to the application. The Niagara Regional staff does not have any objection to the proposed consent application, provided that the requested conditions of approval are fulfilled. Please note that these comments were summarized for the purpose of this meeting, but a full copy has been sent to the committee and applicant. A copy is available for members of the public by contacting the planning department. Given the information in the planning report, planning staff recommend application B12-22-PC be granted for the following reasons. One, that the applicant provides the Secretary Treasurer with the deeds in triplicate for the conveyance of the subject parcel or a registrable legal description of the subject parcel, together with a copy and electronic copy of the deposited reference plan for use in the issuance of the certificate of consent. Two, that a final certificate fee of $216 payable to the City of Port Colborne is submitted to the Secretary Treasurer. 3, approval of a zoning bylaw amendment for Part 1 to agricultural residential zone and for Part 2 to an agricultural purposes only zone. 4, that the owner dedicates a 3.05 meter road widening to the regional municipality of Niagara across the Regional Road 98, frontage of the severed parcel Part 1, prior to the satisfaction of the regional municipality of Niagara. All costs for providing the necessary survey plan and related documents are the responsibility of the applicant. 5, that a drainage apportionment agreement be completed by the city's drainage superintendent or by an approved engineering at the cost of the applicant. A copy of the deposited plan must be delivered to the drainage superintendent through the planning department for the apportionment agreement to be completed. 6, that all conditions of consent be completed by August 10th, 2024. For the following reasons, the application is consistent with the provincial policy statement and conforms to the growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe, the regional official plan, City of Port Colborne official plan, and will also comply with the provisions of the zoning bylaw 6575/3018 as amended. And that concludes the correspondence of this application.
Thank you. Is the applicant here this evening for this application? You the applicant for this application?
Yes, Chris Wilson is. I'm Andy Veenstra. I'm the applicant for the severance, but Chris Wilson is taking care of the.
Okay, sir, just for your, can you just hit there's a little red button on that bar right in front of you there. Perfect, so they can hear you at home. Anyone that's listening on.
I'm Andy Veenstra, and Chris Wilson is taking care of the all the particulars, but I am the applicant for the severance.
Okay, is there anything further you'd like to add at this time?
No.
Okay, does anyone have any questions of the applicant this evening? Not seeing any. Is there any members of the public that wish to speak to this application? Not seeing any. Sorry, Eric, did you have a question? I did have a question with regards to the signage. I know I've been in contact with staff with regards to this, as this application did come forward a couple months ago, I think in June.
Right.
And that there was no sign given to you to put up for this particular meeting. Is that correct?
No signs?
Correct. Was there a sign given to you of notice of meeting?
Yes, they were up until just a few days ago.
For this meeting?
Yes. Oh, pardon me, the first meeting.
The first
But
meeting.
I was not given signs for this meeting.
Okay. And that's where I have a concern. Because I realized notice was given the last time. However, when we adjourned, or sorry, we didn't adjourn. When we deferred the first meeting, we did not give a date to when this meeting was going to happen.
That's right.
And in accordance with the Planning Act, I feel that that doesn't satisfy the requirements of notice with regards to an application. So at this point in time, we've started the application, but I feel that proper notice should be put up. I'll leave it to the committee to decide whether they want to proceed on that matter, but with regards to this particular application, I would ask that proper signage be put up and notice be sent to in accordance with the Planning Act with regards to this application. Gary?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I agree with that point, and there's a charge or there's a way to overcome that. What I'm concerned about is that's, I don't believe, the fault of the applicant, and I'm sure many of us don't think that. He's made a second appearance. He's done what was asked of him. And so on that basis, I would want to proceed and render a decision this evening. And I think that's a matter internally, as you've said, and we've talked about before, that needs to be sorted out. But I don't want to disappoint or have the owner come back because of an internal matter here that still needs to be debated and sorted out. Thank you.
Thank you. Andrew.
Thank you, and through you and to you. I'm of the same opinion as Member Bruno. I do believe, though, that we should add this matter to the end of our agenda into new business and discuss it further when we've dealt with the matters in front of us. If that could be added, I would appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. Art.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to the applicant, was your agent supposed to be in attendance today?
Pardon?
Was your agent supposed to be in attendance today?
No, not that I know of. He was going to do it virtually.
Oh, sorry, I didn't know that. Apparently he's online. Can we bring us the question?
Yep, you can do allow him to be a panelist.
Oh, okay. Sorry, first time.
Yeah.
Eric?
Just through you, I just want to say to both Member Demarest and Member Bruno's comments that I'd be concerned if we let this go, in the sense, if we were to proceed and make a decision, in the event that it would give grounds of appeal to anyone who would choose to appeal it, and it would not be it would be a difficult matter, I think, if it were to go before LPAT. So I just want that to be on the minds of the committee members. But also to the Secretary Treasurer, or maybe to Mr. Room, once the applicant has come forward, is there a certain timeline that we must, by a certain timeline that a decision must be made by?
Well, we'd really like to expedite this thing, because my grandson, who's here with me, he wants to build a house there, or renovate the existing house, probably build a new house. So he'd like to get started as soon as possible.
And through you, Mr. Chair, to the applicant, that is understandable. It's just we're dealing with some more legislated requirements. We have to work within those confines. So to you, Mr. Room, could you respond to my question, please?
Sure, through you, Mr. Chair, to Member Beauregard. Technically, the Planning Act does require that once an application is made, we have 30 days to schedule a meeting. However, it's widely known that throughout the planning field, it's almost impossible to meet that deadline most of the time. In terms of deferrals, once a deferral has been voted on, the Planning Act doesn't have any requirements for notifying for the next date. It's in staff's hands to notify the public. Those who attend that meeting and then hear the deferral are made aware of at that time. We do now also post on our website when applications will be coming back. And that's something that we're kind of looking to improve on in the future. But the Planning Act doesn't have a requirement for re-notifying for a deferred item.
So through you, Mr. Chair, to Chris. So it's not like a zoning bylaw amendment or an official plan amendment where, I believe it's those two applications, where once an application is deemed complete, you have 90 days, I believe, or 120 days to make a decision?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that is still the case with Committee of Adjustment. It's 30 days.
Okay, and that time would have started when?
Through you, Mr. Chair, when they initially applied a couple months ago, I don't have the exact date, but it's been since the last meeting, I think before that one. So it's been 2-3 months probably.
Okay.
You to Mr. Room. Chris, can you refresh my memory on the original deferral? Was that at the request of the applicant or planning department?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the request for deferral was from the region, the original one. They came out to do an inspection of the septic bed and there was no run exposed, so they couldn't identify whether or not the septic was wholly contained on part one. Later it was identified the NPCA required some more time too because there was an unmapped floodplain on the property as well they needed to go out and do a site visit for.
I'm fine with that, thank you.
Sorry, do we have Chris online now?
I'm here.
Mr. Wilson. Sorry, I didn't know you were in the waiting room.
I've been waiting, and I'm surprised you didn't hear me shouting.
So with that, I don't know if you've heard what we've discussed so far, but since you weren't at the start, I will grant you some time now if you wish to add any further comments or additional comments.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate that. I echo Mr. Room's comments. One, that the notices, as far as I know, for the initial hearing were given. The posters were in place up to the date of the initial hearing. There was no other persons in attendance, as far as I'm aware, at that initial hearing. I don't believe the planning department has received any, or the secretary has received any comment or questions from anyone other than the two agencies. When the deferral came up, I attended the meeting and was going to make representations on the payment, but was not afforded an opportunity to speak. Mr. Chairman, you adjourned it immediately, and I thought there should have been some provision because the applicant ended up bearing the cost of that, has paid it last week. We got it on the notice, and since we've already been, I think, at the behest of the region and the Conservation Authority, who frankly had lots of time to do their work, but didn't. We were already behind the 8 ball by almost 2 months. I would respectfully request that you not require any further notification. If a taxpayer or ratepayer did want to make a claim to LPAT that they were somehow not given the required notice, they can make that at that time, but I would think there's absolutely nobody that has taken an interest in the application. This is an absolutely straightforward severance of a surplus farm dwelling. There's absolutely no other change other than to provide the applicant with some recompense for having an extra dwelling that he has no personal need for. It complies with the provincial policies. The region is now satisfied with the septic system. Conservation Authority got around to looking at their floodplain mapping and were satisfied and have confirmed to the secretary. And I certainly have never heard it raised before with respect to a deferral or an adjournment.
If I might, through to the applicant or the agent for the applicant, is there a difference between a deferral and an adjournment?
No, Mr. Chairman, the legal term would be either. There's no absolute difference. The merits of the application haven't been considered until this hearing. I think there's been plenty of notice to any party who might be in interest. Obviously, all of the agencies have commented, and where relevant are all satisfied with the application. I would implore the committee to proceed with their decision.
See, I guess that's where I respectfully disagree. The fact that we deferred the meeting, we did not even start the meeting, it was just simply deferred. If we had adjourned the meeting, then I'd have no issue. And that's the dilemma that I'm in with regards to the application at hand, with regards to notice. I've expressed my concerns to my colleagues here. I guess I know Angie has her hands up. I will listen to Angie. I will then put forward a motion on the floor and we can allow it to go where it goes. So with that, Angie.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Having heard everything, I just don't believe that we should be holding the applicant up or responsible for what has gone on. I think this matter is something to be discussed within the committee and staff after the regular matters are dealt with, and that I'm fully prepared to put a motion forward for this applicant.
Richard, Gary? Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think for the reasons that I and Member Desmarais has articulated, we also have an applicant who has an agent, a lawyer, who's aware of our concerns and is openly stated that he knows then the potential risk of a citizen applying, and that can proceed. I think that in itself is, the applicant has counsel, is fully aware of some members here concerned. I think that they've done all that they could, and seems to me Mr. Room is saying that that's not a requirement, so that's a disagreement on policy decision here, but I don't think it's a disagreement, if I'm reading Mr. Room right, to what the Planning Act says, and his planning lawyer concurs. So on that basis, I would like to proceed and support. Thank you.
Thank you. Gary?
I was put the motion forward. Is that okay? So in application B09-22-PC, the lands known as Concession 2, Part Lot 5 and 6, municipally known as 1498 Wilhelm Road, that consent application B09-22-PC be granted, subject to the conditions outlined in the staff report dated August 5th, 2022. For the following reasons: 1, the application is consistent with the provincial policy statement and conforms to the growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe, the regional official plan, the City of Port Colborne official plan, and will also comply with the provisions of zoning bylaw 6575/30/18 as amended.
Thank you. Can I get a seconder to that? Gary? Questions or comments? All those in favor? Those opposed? Be carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Secretary, the next application, please. I got it. I can clear them all.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Our next application is B12-22-PC and A22-22-PC. In a matter of the Planning Act RSO 1990, CP 13, Section 53(1), and Section 6.5B of the City of Port Colborne zoning bylaw 6575/30/18 as amended. And in the matter of the lands legally known as Part Block F on Plan 775 in the City of Port Colborne, Regional Municipality of Niagara, located in the second density residential zone, municipally known as 624 Elm Street. And in the matter of an application by the agent Lee White on behalf of the owner Brian Keenan for severance under Section 53(1) of the Planning Act RSO 1990 CP 13, so as to permit the conveyance of Part 2 having a lot frontage of 20.04 meters and a lot area of 402 meters squared for future residential use. Part 1 will retain a lot frontage of 20.12 along Elm Street with a lot area of 505 meters squared for an existing residential dwelling. And for relief from the provisions of zoning bylaw 6575/30/18 as amended under Section 45 of the Planning Act RSO 1990 CP 13, so as to permit future residential development notwithstanding the following. 1, that a minimum lot area of 402 meters squared be permitted, whereas 500 meters squared is required in the R2 zone. A notice was circulated to the required agencies on July 18th and the public on July 24th, 2022. As of today, the following comments have been received. The drainage superintendent have no objection to the application. If the newly created parcels do not drain independently of one another, it is recommended that a mutual agreement drain be implemented and registered on the title of all parcels involved. If assistance is required for this, please contact the city's drainage superintendent. The fire department has no objection to the proposed application. Please note that these comments were summarized for the purpose of this meeting, but a full copy has been sent to the committee and applicant. A copy is available for members of the public by contacting the planning department. Given the information in the planning report, planning staff recommend application B12-22-PC be granted for the following reasons. One, that the applicant provides the Secretary Treasurer with the deeds in triplicate for the conveyance of the subject parcel or a registerable legal description of the subject parcel, together with a paper copy and electronic copy of the deposited reference plan for use in the issuance of the certificate of consent. Two, that a final certificate fee of $216 payable to the City of Port Colborne is submitted to the Secretary Treasurer. Three, that a minor variance application, a 22-22-PC be granted. Four, that all conditions of consent be completed by August 10th, 2024. For the following reasons. One, the application is consistent with the provincial policy statement and conforms to the growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe, the regional official plan, City of Port Colborne official plan, and will also comply with the provisions of the zoning bylaw 6575-3018 as amended. And that minor variance application, A22-22-PC, be granted for the following reasons. One, the application is minor in nature, as the decrease in lot area will not negatively impact the subject parcel and can accommodate future development with amenity space. Two, it is appropriate for development of the site, as a reduction in lot area will not restrict the location of a future dwelling on the property. Three, it is desirable and in compliance with the general intent and purpose of the zoning bylaw, as the zoning bylaw permits semi-detached dwellings in the R2 zone and will have enough amenity space for future developments. Four, it is desirable and in compliance with the general intent and purpose of the official plan, as detached dwellings are permitted in the urban residential designation. And that concludes the correspondence for this application.
Thank you. Is the applicant or the agent for the applicant here this evening? Sir? There's a little red button there in the front if you could push that, and feel free to any additional comments that you have.
Thank you very much. And Lee White, 240 Jarvis Street, Fort Erie, Ontario. The owner is also here. Brian Keenan is in attendance, and certainly appreciate your time pertaining to this matter. Seems pretty straightforward. It's infill development, and we will have a deficient lot area. We will be satisfying the frontage, the front yard, the rear yard, and both side yards. So generally in compliance with this one, with the exception of the one lot area. There are also provisions within the zoning bylaw. It's not just 500 square meters, but should the proposed semi on the rear yard portion of the property be divided in the future, there are provisions for that to happen, provided that the lot area for each of those two halves be a minimum of 200 square meters, which we would comply with should that happen after it's constructed, should it decide to be severed at that point. There have been no comments from the public, no substantial concern that has come in. We are aware of the comments from the drainage superintendent and will provide grading plans at the time of building permit to ensure that all aspects of the property as approved would drain independently. So the retained portion on Elm Street, right on the corner, would drain independently of the balance. We will also ensure that the grading plan for the semis will keep each of those two halves draining independently as well, so that should a future consent occur, we won't have to get into the issue of dealing with a mutual consent agreement at that time. And the parcel's not that large, or the topography is not unusual at all, whereby I can imagine that the draining is going to be a problem for us at all. Otherwise, I think it's pretty straightforward. We will be having a positive infill development that is consistent with all of the provincial and regional and municipal policy, and believe that it would be prudent to approve this project, and free to answer any questions that you may have of us.
Thank you. Do any committee members have any questions? Not seeing any. Is there any members of the public that wish to speak to this application this evening? Not seeing any. Angie? Oh,
There's one. Oh, she muted herself.
I thought there wasn't anyone online to speak.
Yeah, someone just came in.
Oh,
Oh, no, never mind.
we're good? Okay, sorry, Angie.
Okay, I would move this. Application A22-22-PC, that the, lands legally known as Part Block F on Plan 775 in the city of Port Colborne, municipally known as 624 Elm Street, be granted, the minor variance, application be granted for the following reasons. One, the application is minor in nature as the decrease in lot area will not negatively impact the subject parcel and can accommodate future development with amenity space. Two, it is appropriate for the development of the site and the reduction in the lot area will not restrict the location of a future dwelling on the property. Three, it is desirable and in compliance with the general intent and purpose of the zoning bylaw, as the zoning bylaw permits semi-detached dwellings in the R2 zone and will have enough amenity space for future dwellings. Four, it is desirable and in compliance with the intent and purpose of the official plan, as detached dwellings are permitted in the urban residential designation. Okay, let me just pull up the other one. Okay, B12. Okay. We're looking at application B1222PC, lands legally known as Part Block F, municipally known as 624 Elm Street. The consent application B12-22-PC be granted, subject to the conditions outlined in the staff report dated August 5th, 2022, for the following reasons. One, the application is consistent with the provincial policy statement and conforms to the growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe, the regional official plan, City of Port Colborne official plan, and will also comply with the provisions of the zoning bylaw 6575/30/18 as amended.
Thank you. Can I get a seconder to that? Eric? Any questions or comments? Eric?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to the applicant. I noticed on the severance sketch there that it does show a concrete walkway that crosses over the parcels. So is that still existing?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes it is, and we would propose that it would be removed.
Okay. I think typically in my experience, those are usually like a condition that anything that's traversing across the lot line, like a proposed lot line, would be removed. So I'd like to see that entered as a condition of approval. So
You had that as a friendly amendment. You good with that?
We would be amenable to that as well, thank you.
Sam, you got that? An extra condition on it? Okay. So with that, any other questions or comments? All those in favor? Be carried. Thank you. And Madam Secretary, whenever you're ready, are you going to do all of them together for the same property?
Yes, are we proceeding?
Yeah?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. Our next application covers 4 applications. So that will be B01-22-PC, B02-22-PC, B03-22-PC, and A21-22-PC. And in the matter of the Planning Act, RSO 1990, CP 13, Section 53(1) and Section 12.3A of the City of Port Colborne zoning bylaw 6575/3018 as amended. And in the matter of the lands legally known as Concession 1, Lot 14 in the City of Port Colborne, Municipality Regional Municipality of Niagara, located in the Hamlet Residential Zone on the south side of Killaley Street East. And in the matter of an application by the owner, Robert and Margaret Williams, for severance under Section 53(1) of the Planning Act, RSO 1990, CP 13, so as to permit the conveyance of Part 2, Part 3, and Part 4 for future residential use. Part 1 will be retained for future residential use. And for relief from the provisions of the zoning bylaw 6575/3018 as amended. Under Section 45 of the Planning Act, RSO 1990, CP 13, so as to permit future residential development notwithstanding the following. One, that a minimum lot frontage of 28.82 meters be permitted for Part 1, whereas a lot frontage of 45 meters is required. The 4 notices were circulated to required agencies on July 18th and the public on July 26th. As of today, the following comments for the applications have been received. The fire department has no objection to the proposed application and made note that the private road cannot be less than 6 meters in width and 12-meter center line turning radius is required for Killaley Street. The drainage superintendent has no objection to the application, but notes a drainage apportionment agreement will be required if severance is approved. The Niagara Regional staff does not object to the proposed consent application, provided that the requested conditions of approval are fulfilled. The MTO has no objection to the proposed applications. MTO building and land use permits are required for each new lot before the commencement of any on-site construction works. Please note that these comments were summarized for the purpose of this meeting, but a full copy has been sent to the committee and applicant. A copy is available for members of the public by contacting the planning department. So, just a couple of things here. We do have a couple recommendations. So in review of the description of the notice of hearing and noting inconsistent references to the site plan sketch, planning staff offers a revised recommendation to the planning comments dated August 5th. So the planning staff recommends consent applications B01-22-PC, B02-22-PC, and B03-22-PC be deferred until September 2022 to permit adequate time for recirculation of a new public notice. And that a minor variance application for A21-22-PC be granted for the following reasons. 1, the application is minor in nature, as a decrease in lot frontage for 45 meters to 28.82 meters will not negatively impact the subject parcel. 2, it is appropriate for development of the site, as a reduction in lot frontage will not restrict the location of a future dwelling on the property. 3, it is desirable and in compliance with the general intent and purpose of the zoning bylaw, as the zoning bylaw permits detached dwellings in the HR zone, and a future dwelling will be able to meet the setback requirements of the zone. And 4, it is desirable and in compliance with the general intent and purpose of the official plan, as detached dwellings are permitted in the Hamlet designation. And that concludes the correspondence of these applications.
Thank you. Is the agent or the applicant here this evening? Feel free to come up to the side there for us.
Mr. Chairman, my name is Robert Williams, 657 Clarence Street, Port Colborne, Ontario. Also online, Eldon has signed in. He has been my consultant through this process. And would it be appropriate for me to ask him to speak about the deferral on my behalf?
Absolutely.
Thank you, sir.
Very good. Thank you very much. Mr. Chair. I understand that there's a small discrepancy in the notice sign. I have to speak to that. The intent and purpose of the severances are clear. There have been no public comments that we've received to date or been aware of. There's nothing that turns on the description itself. The Planning Act talks about providing notice to, which gives an explanation and purpose of the effect of the application, a description of the subject lands, where and when additional material will be available for public inspection, and of course the statement regarding appeals. The public has seen the signs. They have had full opportunity to review the applications. If there's anybody in attendance tonight, I would welcome them to speak to that, but to defer this application for the severances, I don't believe that's necessary, considering the fact that the intent and purpose has been made clear. The second thing I'd like to speak to is with regards to the minors, but I'll hold those comments until that discussion.
If you like, you can fully put that out there right now if you like.
Okay, thank you very much. The minor variance is based on a severance sketch, and specifically it is mentioned 28.82 meters of frontage. When the surveyor goes out to confirm the boundaries, that number may slightly change. It'd be really unfortunate if the confirmed frontage is just slightly under, and I would highly recommend that the committee allow some wiggle room of 28.5 meters, just to ensure that that there is no discrepancies and no challenges when the surveyor finishes his work, and a minor change in that frontage has no bearing whatsoever from a planning standpoint.
With that, so you said the 28.5?
I'm just adjusting that, yeah. So right now, it's, the survey sketch says 28.82 plus or minus. So when he goes to pin it, it could be 28.8, it could be 28.19, it could be 28.7 or 28.3. If it's over, it doesn't matter, but the challenge becomes if it's slightly under, and depending on the practices of the city of Port Colborne staff, they may or may not accept that. I just wanted to bring that for discussion purposes to the committee this evening.
Very good. I will ask any committee members that have any questions. Gary.
In this case, not to Mr. Darbison, but through you to Mr. Room. Chris, Mr. Darbison talks about that's generally accepted planning practices on this pinning of the survey after the fact. Would you concur?
Sorry, I might need you to rephrase that. It's a little distracted.
So Mr. Darbison has indicated that the fluctuations in the survey may come later at the pinning, and that's not abnormal in the planning process. And so I want to be pretty exacting on that and get staff's opinion of Mr. Darbison's opinion.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, to Member Bruno. Yeah, it's really not entirely set in stone until the surveyor does go out and do the stakes. There's no point in really getting a surveyor out there just for the survey sketch when the intent of the consent application is to have a discussion about the boundaries, right? We can discuss these proposed lot lines at the meeting, and then turns out that we need them altered for whatever reason, which might impact the outcome of the consent. So yeah, I wouldn't say that it's out of practice.
Sorry,
it's not.
Okay, thank you.
Eric?
And through you, Mr. Chair, I concur with Chris in my day job. we typically leave some wiggle room because, as the agent said, and as well as Chris has said, you don't know until the R plan is created, the reference plan is created, and when they go out there and set the bars, what the exact pinpoint is. A severance sketch is just, I guess, dimensions that are taking off a different database. It's not actually in the field, at least in my understanding of it. It's not until they actually go out and set the bars and do that they know exactly what the measurements are. So wiggle room is usually actually necessary, because you do not want to come back and go get a building permit and then find out that you missed it because of a fraction. So.
Angie, you got any questions?
No, actually, I'm good with it all.
I'll kind of concur with your statements with regards to consents, 100%. We've seen that all the time where boundaries shift. The problem here is on the variance, and we cannot grant more variance than what was posted. We can grant less, but we can't grant more. And I think that's the concern of your agent here, is that if it happens to be 28.6, that is more than what was asked for, and therefore we have a problem. You'd have to send out for re-notification. I guess the way around it would be to adjourn that particular application if you want to take the chance and not find out. And then if you don't need to, it would just a matter of the deferral or the adjournment cost to wait, or you roll the dice and make sure that your surveyor gets 28.82 or greater than that, in which case then you're okay, because you had right down to 28.82. I agree on the consents 100%. Shifting, and that's why, when I seen the notice about the request to defer these because of the frontages, is really becomes down to a technicality of the lots are actually all the same size. It's just this little bit of wiggle room in the front for access and so on and so forth. But for all intents and purposes, the lots are basically uniform across the board, but for that little entrance piece. So I would say that I know in the case of the variance, we are kind of stuck at 28.82 simply because we can't go less than that, because that's what the notice says. With regards to consent, if the property boundaries vary slightly, that happens all the time. So I could leave it for your discretion there, but like I say, as far as I know, when it comes to variance, we can't grant less without proper notification. And if it says 28.82, we can't go less than that without proper notification. So that's always been our practice here. I know we've made applicants come back because they built a roof boundary 0.1 meter higher than they were allowed to. At some point you got to draw a line, and that's unfortunately the line in this particular case, but from my perspective. So with that, is there any members of the public that wish to speak to this application? Please, if you could just come up to the front, name and address for the record, and don't worry, we don't bite.
Keep going right up to
It's all right, it's all going. Yep.
Okay. My name is Karen Hartery. I live at 2665 Highway 3, which is right adjacent to the properties in question. So I have a couple of reservations. One is water drainage. It is a somewhat wet area as it is, and there's already been some work to drain it, and it's worked fairly well, but there's still rather wet, and then we are concerned that it's going to drain onto our property instead of to the roadside. So that is one of our concerns. Another concern we have is also water supply. How are you going to be getting water to these homes? Is it going to be a well water situation? And in that case, is our well, like natural water source, which is what we are on, is that going to be sufficient to support another 4 houses? That's all I have.
With regards to, I know the agent is still on the line. Can the agent address any of those concerns?
Mr. Chair? I could actually address.
Okay, very good.
That's okay.
Yes, thank you.
Mr. Chair, answering the second question, our recommendation through the hydrogeologist, which you won't have a chance to see that report, is the hydrogeologist, we've recommended cisterns for the properties. So you're concerned about affecting your well water. The other issue in terms of the drainage is there is a drainage plan. I hope that you see the significant improvement in the ditch.
There has been one, although I must admit we just recently moved there.
Okay. And
so I don't have previous years' experience.
Sorry. Mr. Chair, I'm sorry, I should be
That's
addressing
okay.
you, sir. My apologies. Mr. Chair, with the first comment concerning the drainage, there is a drainage plan. The ditch, which had not been cleaned out for quite some time, I'm going to put the 50-year point out there, because I believe that the city of Port Colborne may have thought it belonged to MTO. MTO thought it belonged to the city. The city has been incredibly cooperative in making drainage out of a pool table, sir. And so we had to have fall from their property, which is to the east of the proposed lots, and we do have drainage to the west to an actually catch basin, which then goes. It's part of the MTO series of catch basins. It's not a soaker. It's a proper catch basin. So we do have fall to that. Just briefly talking about the drainage plan is that laterals will be run between each property line, not on their property, but beside their property, which will be running north and south between each property line, which then takes the drainage north, the way it was intended to be, to the north, and then flowing west to the catch basin. It's interesting because in our early investigation, and it really was just out there kicking around in the ditch, and I said, what is this in the ditch? And it's a catch basin. And so the drainage engineer, Brian Kostick, came out with the supervisor for the digging crew. I apologize, I can't think of his name right now. And they were surprised to see it was there because it wasn't on any of the regional records. So it was a very nice coup that a drain that really was being very underutilized, not just because of slope, but because of the ingrowth in the ditch, is now active again. So the drainage plan has taken, I'm going to use this term because I believe that Brian has said this to me, extraordinary efforts to bring the drainage to the north on my property to the municipal ditches.
Very good, thank you.
Thank you.
So with that, did the agent want to pop in? He's good? Okay. Is there any other members of the public that wish to speak to this application? Not seeing any? Is there any other questions to the applicant this evening? If everyone's good with it, we can maybe do the consents first, and then maybe we can talk a little bit more about the variance, just because there was a question about whether we can vary it or not, or change the variance. I don't want to say vary the variance, but change the variance. So if that works for everyone, or if you have some other comments, and Eric, I seen your hand up.
Through you, Mr. Chair, would we have to do the variance first in order to proceed with the consent? Because can the consents applications, because once the lots are created, do they need to have that minor variance in order to be created? Is my question.
The one particular lot, I think it's part 1, if I'm correct, because it's narrow, the way it's surveyed out, that one has the condition that the variance be granted, because it is narrow.
Okay, so I guess my concern is if we didn't go forward with the minor variance, then what would happen with that consent application where it's affected by?
That one, I believe they would have 2 years to get that, if it came to be and it needed the variance, they would have 2 years then to get that variance.
Okay.
And would need that before they can officially finish the consent.
Okay.
I might add, I know in this particular case, the plot plan that was presented, I will say, was very creative. I'm assuming that the flag, the little strip that goes across is so that way they all front onto a serviced road. Is that correct?
To you, Mr. Chair, it does serve that way. I think it started out the applicant wanted to each give each parcel access to the road so that they could have their own private lane. That's why they are the width that they are as well, to accommodate a car. After our review, we established that it's not entirely possible to police something like that. You're going to have people driving over top of lot lines. There's going to be disputes with neighbors in the future. So that's why we've asked for the easement to be one of the conditions. So initially it was for access for cars to drive on independently. However, it does also serve as that requirement that all lots have to have frontage on a municipal road. So yeah.
And to that point, is there a minimal amount that has to front? Like I don't want to split hairs. I think these are like 2.44 meters or something.
Yeah, they are 1.83 meters in width on Kalele for two of them. I don't believe that there is a minimum amount.
Because the other, I guess to the other point with regards to the variance, I think initially when this application come forward, the thought was that you measure the frontage based on 10 meters from the front lot line. Was that correct? That's what the assumption was originally, and then it turned out to be 6 meters.
That's correct, yeah.
If they were to change that strip from, I believe it's 2.44, I can't see my image on my screen, but I believe it's 2.44. If they reduce that down to, say, 1.99 for each one of those little pieces going across, that would get you to less than the 6 meters, in which case then part one now has a frontage of whatever it was originally and would comply, and they wouldn't need the variance.
To you, Mr. Chair, technically, yes, that is correct. Yeah, if you had three lengths that are less than 2 meters, you'd be less than 6, and you wouldn't require the variance. But we had to propose it. We had to provide it the way it was proposed.
Would that be something that would be that would, I guess, basically, unfortunately, you've already started the application, but would eliminate that risk of it being narrower or not? In which case, then, even if it turned out to be narrower, it wouldn't really matter because the lot frontage then is measured beyond where that little strip is, and it kind of solves that problem. Being that it's a very minimal amount, we talked about consents having some fluctuation and variances from what was proposed to where it actually ends up. It's such a minor little shift in the front property line. I think that might be a way to get around the application here for the minor variance. I would even go so far as to say, if you want it, because you've already started the process with the variance, we can adjourn that particular thing or that particular application until you can maybe sort out if that's a possibility to move those, in which case then you can just leave it or withdraw it afterwards because it wouldn't be necessary, and then you don't have that extra variance, if that makes sense. At least then you can move forward with the consents. If that's amenable to everyone. I don't know if that's a help or not. I had another point, but I forgot what it is, but maybe it'll come back to me. Eric.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to you. If we do proceed that way, should probably remove that condition then of the minor variance having to be granted, correct?
We could still leave the condition on there, and then if it turns out that this works, on conditions of consent, I believe they can just come back to the committee and ask that condition be removed. As long as they're complying with it, that is one of the options that we have for consents, is conditions that are applied can then be removed at a future time by the committee.
Okay. Another, through you, Mr. Chair, to Mr. Room. Have there been instances where a condition is satisfied to the municipality's satisfaction or the planning department's satisfaction? Like, isn't there usually some type of wiggle room where, as long as the municipality says it's okay, then it's fine? That condition can be satisfied?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, to Member Beauregard. You could always word it in such a way to say that in the event that a minor variance is required, it be fulfilled, something like that.
Okay, I'd be amenable to that.
And I just remember what the other point was I was thinking of. We talked about this right of way, and I believe in the staff report it talked about easements being registered on title. Would that be considered an easement in perpetuity? And would that also then be part of this consent granting?
To you, Mr. Chair, it's kind of up to the applicant. There's a few ways you can go about registering easements. You can do them through lawyers. However, that would be 21 years less 1 day. If they want to do one in perpetuity, they would have to come forward to the Committee of Adjustment, but they don't necessarily have to.
Or would that be too far of a stretch to add to these applications? Is that a slowly separate application process that considers different things?
To you, Mr. Chair, they need to come back and apply for a consent application again.
Okay.
Okay.
So that's something to consider because of that right away. If you grant it or you wanted it for more than 21 years, I'm assuming your house is going to last more than 21 years. You could run into a problem down the road, so it might be something you want to look at and clean up beforehand. So with that, I don't have anything further unless anyone else has got anything. So maybe to the applicant, would that be something that you'd like to do, is to adjourn the variance application, or do you want to just roll the dice with the 28 and think that the rest is going to go through, and then if it becomes an issue, you just run the risk of starting, I don't know what the deferral cost is or the adjournment cost is versus a new application. I don't think it's half the price or something. I don't know what the rates are. They're set by the city, but if that's something that you would consider, or that's totally up to you if that's something that you'd like to ask for.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, it was interesting because when I knew that we had a width of 6 meters for the private laneway, and I knew that it was required of 6 meters of setback, I thought the numbers being right on meant it was considered frontage. I appreciate the suggestion very much of the 1.99 that allow it to be frontage, and I would be very agreeable to that. With that being said then, with the minor variance, I think the term roll the dice on the fact that the minor variance would no longer be required if that the committee would be of accepting of the stacking amount of making it less than 6 meters total, allowing then true frontage onto the municipal road or ditch, whatever we call it.
Okay. Yeah, as far as the finalized layout of the lots, I don't think that's even something that we even dictate. I think it's basically the general concept, and the variance of that little strip there. I don't even think that's under our purview to decide. If it's going to be a little bit less, it is noted in the record that it is less, but Eric, you have some experience in this field, I think, a little bit, but from my perspective, it's a very minor adjustment, and that I don't think it has really any impact with regards to the lots themselves, other than helping you out with your variance. So with that, yeah, if that's your case, then we can do them all together if you so desire. If someone wants to move on any of them. Gary, you got any questions?
No, I guess Mr. Chair, I guess I'm concerned that I'm concerned with the level of advice and options that we're offering as a committee of adjustment, as opposed to the applicant and his, whilst I think it's admirable, I don't know that, certainly the applicant has a agent, and I don't know if you wanted to refer to him, but I'm okay with it. I guess I'm a bit perplexed at the way this process on this application has gone vis-a-vis the ones for the last dozen or so years that I've been involved in. But I have no objection, and I have no new question, and I think it's an elegant solution to a problem. So that's all I have, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Chair, maybe I've had my hand up, but I don't think it's noticed virtually. Track it down.
It's okay. Go ahead.
So what I just simply wanted to say was the application for the variance, it literally was 28.82 plus or minus. So if we agree on that, because nothing's changed, then the plus or minus stands. And then therefore, our client has the opportunity to tighten things up and come back if necessary. Also, I'm wondering if we agree at that point, if deferrals are not even necessary for my previous explanation about the notice. So I would encourage the committee to recognize the 28.82 plus or minus. All the dimensions on the sketch are plus or minus, which is very typical. I know the committee has seen that before, and that nothing does have to change. So in terms of wiggle room, in terms of reducing it to 28.5 or 7 or whatever the case, we can leave it as is, as you've had suggested, but we do need to recognize the plus or minus. And if that's okay, then I believe the committee can move forward with a decision this evening on all the applications.
I guess to your point, I'll go back to my previous comments. With regards to consents, I agree. With regards to minor variances, I do not agree. It says the minimum lot frontage of 28.82 meters, period. It doesn't say plus or minus on the application for the variance. So you can go greater than, you can't go less than. That's always been the case for variances. For consents, there's some flexibility there. It's the concept and everything else, because you're not violating a bylaw. You're just shifting stuff around within the requirements of the bylaw to comply. In this particular case, this, depending upon how it's laid out, does put this one particular part in violation of the bylaw. Therefore, we can only grant a limit, because what one person's plus or minus may be someone else's. It's basically comes down to the definition of what's considered minor. In this case, we have a limit, and that's the limit. Unfortunately, that's the way the application is written for the minor variance.
Through you, Mr. Chair, fair enough. We can agree to that, and I think what we would request then is if the committee can consider all the applications together for decision this evening, we'll accept the minor variance at 28.82. Provided my client is okay with that, knowing that we do have to pin these, and if because the consents are plus or minus, surely we'll be able to meet the minimum frontage of 28.82. I would just defer to my client to agree to that before my comments are made final.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I do agree with your explanation and the number. I'll re-ask the question though. If in fact that we move forward and the combined widths of the driveway become 5.97 meters.
As long as they're less than 6, your frontages will be defined per the bylaw the way the plan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate the comment from Gary that it was in fact an eloquent solution. So thank you.
Thank you. So with that, someone want to move? Whoever wants to read along. Gary?
Are we doing A2122 first, the variance?
You can do them however you prefer.
Okay. Start with application A2122. Matter of the lands legally known as concession 1, lot 14 on the south side of Kalali Street. The minor variance application A21-22 PCB granted for the following reasons. The application is minor in nature as the decrease in lot frontage from 45 meters to 28.82, that's spot on, will not negatively impact the subject parcel. 2, is appropriate for the development of the site as the reduction in lot frontage will not restrict the location of a future dwelling on the property. 3, it is desirable in compliance with the general intent and purpose of the zoning bylaw. The zoning bylaw permits detached dwellings in the HR zone, and a future dwelling will be able to meet the setback requirements of the zone. And 4, it is desirable in compliance with the general intent and purpose of the official plan, as detached dwellings are permitted in the hamlet designation. And then we'll go over.
Second. Did you want to do them all together, or you want to just?
No, we can do one.
Okay.
Sure.
Seconder to that, Eric? Questions or comments? All those in favor? Be carried.
Okay, to the consent. Where are we here? Here we go. Respect to application B01-22PC, the lands legally known as concession 1, lot 14 on the south side of Kalali Street East. the consent application B01-22PC be granted subject to the conditions outlined in the staff report dated August 5th, 2022. For the following reasons. One, the application is consistent with the provincial policy statement and conforms to the growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe, the regional official plan, City of Port Colborne official plan, and will also comply with the provisions of zoning bylaws 6575-30-18 as amended.
Thank you. Seconder to that, Mayor. All those in favor? Carried.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. With application B0222PC, the lands legally known as Concession 1, Lot 14, south side of Cloud Street East. Consent application B0222PC be granted subject to the conditions outlined in the staff report dated August 5th, 2022, for the following reasons. The application is consistent with the provincial policy statement, conforms to the growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe, the regional official plan, City of Port Colborne official plan, and will also comply with the provisions of zoning bylaws 6575-30-18 as amended.
Seconder, Angie. All those in favor? That'll be carried.
And finally, with respect to application B03-22PC, the lands legally known in concession 1, lot 14, south side of Cloud Street East, consent application B03-22B PC be granted subject to the conditions outlined in the staff report dated August 5th, 2022 for the following reasons. One, the application consistent with the provincial policy statement conforms to the growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe, the regional official plan, City of Port Colborne official plan, and will also comply with the provisions of the zoning bylaw 6575-30-18 as amended.
Thank you. Seconder to that, Angie. All those in favor? It'll be carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Mr. Chair, the committee.
All right, that concludes.
Can you do that vote again, please? I missed on the camera.
Oh, yeah, sure. All in favor of that last motion for B0322PC? Be carried. Thank you. So that concludes the applications this evening. The next item on our agenda is other business, and Angie, can I throw it to you to start things off with our earlier discussion?
Okay, excuse me, I would actually like to have a staff position on how the signage actually plays out in the case of adjournments or deferrals when we're seeing an application yet again. What exactly are we to expect going forward?
Yeah, that's a good question through you, Mr. Chair. Going forward, I don't believe we will be re-notifying. We won't be sending out public notices, and we won't be requiring a sign again. We've talked internally among staff, and we believe that moving forward, when a deferral is made, we will set a date at the time, and we will notify on our website. So that will be the procedure moving forward.
Okay, so considering that, then, can we find some sort of defensible argument that we can use, something that is coming out of the Act or you know?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. We can definitely do some more research into it. However, the Act does not state that once a deferral has been made that we do need to re-notify. So we do know off the bat that the initial re-notification isn't required.
Yeah, and I do understand that that's not stating something has to happen doesn't necessarily mean, you know, it doesn't do it all. So if we could find a way to say that we are actually safe in making the decision that this will not happen going forward, then fine. But otherwise, the committee is left in a real quandary. So I would like to get this set down in a really strong legal sense.
I'll go to Gary first.
Just to Member Demery's point, so we have a Committee of Adjustment Association. I'm not sure if, Angie, we were referring to a legal opinion. I mean, I know, generally speaking, we don't use case law and Committee of Adjustments, but certainly on process, I think, you know, 444 municipalities the last 25 years, somebody may have brought up a notice issue on a referral. And so it seems to me it would be great to hear how that was adjudicated by either the then OMB or LPAT or its now successor. So is there a way to do that kind of deep research? Because at the end of the day, I think what we really want is to, as best possible, with our best efforts, bulletproof an appeal that becomes successful because of a notice issue like a sign or recirculation. If you've landed on a decision within the department, that's one thing. But the basis, I think we want to know that there's a sound basis for it, that it's not just this city's department's interpretation, no offense.
Right. Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. We can definitely look into that. Off the top of my head, I don't believe that there are any appeals based on deferral notices, which I think might slightly speak to that, but we can definitely do more research into it.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I kind of was thinking the same thing as Member Bruno was saying. I think this is something that if went to, I don't think you have necessarily the authority to go to our solicitor, but I think going to the city solicitor, they can provide us with a quick opinion real fast that would be very concrete. Because this is not a matter of policy, this is a matter of law, in my opinion. And we can do, internal department, planning department can look, I'm sure you're familiar with the organization Canley, the website Canley. Yeah. So Canley, you can search up legal decisions from LPAT, any of the tribunals really, and court decisions. And you can look at there are specific sections. You can search by section. So any section applying notice, and you can do a search through there to find decisions that are related to there. And then you could also do what's called a Boolean search, which is like you use particular words and whatnot, and then you can really narrow your search. So, I mean, we can do that. I think the planning department could look into that a little bit more, but I know our legal, since I worked there in the past, would be able to find an answer to our question pretty quickly, and have probably dealt with this issue on their own. So,
Angie?
Thank you. If I can, I think what Eric has put forward is the way to go. I'm looking up on the Ontario Association of Community of Adjustments and Consent Authorities website, and their legislation section really is talking about 6 specific bills and only that. So that's not really a resource. I would think that Eric has got the right thinking there.
With regards to that, I've already contacted OACA, and I received a response back from the Manager of Development Services and Secretary-Treasurer to the Committee of Adjustment for Vaughan. I think she's also a president or one of the directors of OACA. And she gave some advice which was kind of ambiguous as well. It wasn't 100% clear cut. But I guess their approach is to always give notice for the simple fact of it should be open to the public, and they should always know when there's a public hearing. This is a public hearing. In our particular case, when an applicant requests a deferral, they pay a fee for that. I'm assuming the fee is to cover the cost of the meeting, to cover the cost of staff time, depending upon the purpose or the reason for the deferral. If there's additional recirculation or whatever else, I would assume that those costs are to help offset those costs. I'm just speaking from a discussion that I had with staff after our last meeting with regards to that. So maybe that's something that we can look at. Personally, I'm of the opinion there should really never be a deferral. Bring it to the committee, and if there isn't enough information to render a decision, we can adjourn it, in which case I 100% agree you don't have to give notice because we've started the meeting. My point is that when we defer a meeting, we have not started a meeting. So therefore the meeting is at the next date, or whenever you do have that is the meeting date, not before, because we never started the meeting. We deferred it. We didn't talk about it. We didn't bring it forward. I guess to Chris Wilson's point earlier on his application is he said he wished he could have spoke to it. But because we deferred it, that means the meeting did not start. So you don't know what his opinion might have been or his comments would have been. So I'm a firm believer we shouldn't really defer anything. Bring it up. If we need to adjourn it, that's an option that we have. For a future meeting date, we can set a date and say it's coming back next month or whatever. what information do we need to then render a decision at that time? That's my opinion, but like I say, we'll go to Eric and then Gary.
In my experience, because I've ran into the issues working at Upper Canada, we've had applications in St. Catharines and in Thorold where the notice was not correct, and it's the specific like frontage requirements, somewhat similar to this that we've dealt with, and those municipalities have required us to put up new signs. I'm not familiar with the process that we're thinking of proceeding on. I'm used to a whole new notice and going and meeting the notice requirements for the next meeting. So that's all I can say.
To that point, in the case of if something has changed, 100%, I don't think there's any question even with staff with regards to that. If say for instance, this particular application, it was 28 point and they wanted 25, you basically I won't say you got to completely start over, but you got to go back out to all agencies as well, because that little snippet of change could then affect an MDS calculation or whatever, right? So in that particular case, 100%, then it should all go back out. But we're just talking that if they defer for whatever reason, they couldn't make the meeting or whatever, that really shouldn't be the case. But Angie.
Thank you again through you to Chris. I'll ask you about this. So we know that we do need an opinion, and that there has to be, it's not just opinion, actually. We need a decision that's got some legal backing to it, so that we're clear on how to go forward. I would be interested to know why the decision has been made not to apply a new sign, because I mean it's a minor deal. You just do it and it's done. It takes away the issue. So I would kind of be interested to know why that decision was made. I'd also would like to know at what point, and like who has the final authority here? Where do we stand? Because you have the committee on one side saying that they would like to see it be one way, or have a legal opinion saying what it should be, and then we have staff doing. There's a complete difference there. Where staff is saying no, that the decision has been made that we're not doing it. So it would be very interesting to do that, because we have to be working together in the future, and we have to get these things sorted around.
Sure. Through you, Mr. Chair. To answer your first question, the sign, it's not one or the other. It's posting the sign and sending the notices. So it's really just staff time. Something you have to consider there is if we defer an application that has 100 applicants on the mailing list, that's staff time that we have to go through again, which arguably I would probably say the deferral fee might not cover that. I think it's more intended to cover the wages of the committee. If we only have one item on that agenda and it gets deferred, that's payment for the committee that had to show up that day. And with regards to your second question, it's tough, because it's one of those things that is so ambiguous. We've all kind of talked about it. We haven't sought out a legal opinion yet. We can definitely do that if that's something the committee is interested in. We might have to discuss that with Denise, just because there's financial implications when it comes to that. For the most part, it has just been the planners analyzing the Planning Act and determining and speaking to it. And with that regard, when it comes to an application being appealed, it's up to the planner to defend that position. The OLT would have to ask why wasn't deferral sent. We would have to interpret our interpretation of the Planning Act. So.
To your point about who has the final call, this may be up for debate. Maybe it's not.
That's what I want to know.
The Planning Act clearly states the committee shall give notice. And it's typically, yes, staff does execute that, or the secretary, treasurer, whoever is assigned to the committee as that role. But it's the committee that makes that decision. Yes, if something gets appealed, then staff has to defend their position. They don't have to defend the committee's position.
I would agree with you. From what I've read, that's what it says as well. But it appears to be that there's a little bit of a different thinking here. So I want all of us to be on that same page, so we all understand the same thing and we can move forward, and the public sees that we just have our stuff together and we know what we're doing.
Absolutely. Gary?
I'm going to take a slightly different tack, because we're in the weeds on this one. We're in the forest. At the end of the day, the sign in the notice is really about nobody in the room or the applicant. It's about the people out there who aren't subject and involved in this whole thing. And so the two methods of them being involved is the sign and the notice. And it just seems to me that, I don't want to we could take a small wager on it, but I suspect that if the legal firm said, no, you don't have to, but I suspect they'll say, but it might be a good idea to do so. Because that's what they often say. And so at the end of the day, if it's really about ensuring transparency in the public process and their opportunity, if we were to do it, and to Chris's point, like I know there are departments in the city that in order to manage their time, they bill or set their fees on an overtime rate for staff. They don't actually even do it on straight time because it's something over and above. So if you think about the amount of these deferrals, we collect a fee, you can change the fee to cover what the average cost is. There's the 100 notices and there's the 4. And so at the end of the day, I don't see how you can go wrong with covering all costs, transparent, give notice, no chance of appeal. I mean, I think there is a solution that is, correct me if I'm wrong, but more notice may be better notice, but I think it's certainly bulletproof, or maybe as best bulletproof as you can. So I'm really all about not setting the planning department or the municipality back on time and dollars. And these things don't happen that often. And certainly we already have a fee for it. If you make sure the fee's enough, I think we can manage it.
For sure. Eric?
I just want to put out there's other ways to give notice other than just signage, right? There's the other alternative is newspaper. Hey, it's not the greatest. However, there is one municipality in the region that does it. It's Welland. And I know, I'm not saying that we do it, I'm just saying it is an alternative and it would solve some of those issues.
Ken, in the matter of notice, the only thing that is effective is a sign on the property. All the other ones, you're shooting in the air and hoping your bullet lands. That's what you're doing. The sign on the property is concrete. People that are going to be affected by changes to that property are seeing it. They're seeing it all the time, every time they pass it. So that's the one thing that matters. Everything else is maybe you'll catch them, maybe you won't. And let's face it, newspapers will tell you right now they're dying. They can't get people to buy papers. So people are not reading those newspapers. You can put them online, but they may or may not be able to get that. You can put them on city websites. We've heard about that. These things don't work. What does work is the sign on the property, the one that they have to go by every day, the one that is going to impact their property in the future. That's what matters. So that's why this is it sounds silly, but it is a very important thing. So if we could just get to the bottom of it, make a final decision, and be able to defend that decision, I'm okay with whatever way that turns out. And I have my wish, and that is that we always provide a sign. But I'll go with whatever the decision is, but I really need that we all need to get to that place.
Thank you. Anyone else got anything else? Is there any other new business? We good? The other item is the minutes from our July 13th meeting. A mover and a seconder for that. Angie, Gary, all those in favor? That'd be carried. And with that, I will call this meeting closed.